Welcome to the Medical Receptionist Network podcast show. I'm your host, Siobhan Atkins. Join us as we discuss the importance of clerical and administrative roles and their impact on the healthcare industry. Hello, welcome to another episode of the Medical Receptionist Network podcast show. Today I have a very special guest, Coley Bennett. She is a certified medical manager, a certified compliance officer, and also a member of the National Advisory Board for PAHCOM, which is the Professional Association of Healthcare Office Management. So we're going to welcome Coley. Hi, Coley. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
Wonderful, wonderful. So Coley and I met about 2 years ago at a conference, and we pretty much immediately were able to kind of hang out and have some really good conversation and experience some of the conference segments together. And we have been able to stay in contact, and it's been a pleasure for me to have her on today. And I'm actually on site, which we haven't done so far. So it's really good to actually be here and visit her office and, understand exactly what she does on a daily basis. So Coley's practice is specialized in behavioral health. Would you say behavioral health? Okay.
Yes.
So psychotherapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and other psychiatric disorders. We're going to get into more of that. But
Definitely interesting. Definitely interesting.
Absolutely. So you seem to have been very dedicated to your own professional growth, and
yes.
You have some great credentials.
Thank you.
Can you tell us how that has enhanced your career personally?
It's been a whirlwind. Quite often professional women and others don't realize how much you know until you actually sit down and speak with people who maybe do the same thing that you do, kind of like when we met.
Right.
It can be very interesting to kind of sit back and maybe take an exam or, like in PAHCOM, talk to other people in the profession, and you realize you have this wealth of information that you've actually only worked with and not got full credit for.
Right.
So once I realized I was a lot smarter than I gave myself credit for, I decided that I should probably put a name on it.
Okay.
Names are marketable.
Right.
Skills are proof, but names are marketable.
Right.
So I joined PAHCOM. Once I joined PAHCOM, I decided that I needed to be a certified medical manager. Mm-hmm. I'm a very good student. I studied hard. I read the books. I made some pre-tests and did those kind of things. I'm kind of type A.
Yes, absolutely.
So I sat for my CMM and sailed through that. And then I discovered that having that CMM added real value to my work. Right. Not only a knowledge base, but some zeros on the back of the paycheck.
Right.
So that's very important.
Right.
So I said, if the CMM can do that, well, let me see what my other skills translate into.
Right.
And I discovered that being a compliance officer fits very well with being a certified medical manager. Mm-hmm. It's kind of verifying the things that you do as a manager.
Right.
So hand in hand, and so far so good. It's built a very nice career. There are a couple of other things I want to add on, but I'm in no rush.
Okay. Okay. That's impressive, just what you've done alone. I personally have not gotten my certified medical manager. That is a goal of mine. But it's definitely, when you take those extra steps to broaden your education and add to your value for yourself and your practice or your medical office, is always very helpful. So do you believe, and I'm pretty sure you're going to say yes, that career development and training increases confidence and dedication?
Without question. Mm-hmm. There's nothing like knowing what you're doing. Right. I mean, we do a lot of tasks throughout the day that we kind of just blow off as things that we just naturally do. But sometimes you do things that bring a specific value to a specific situation. For example, way back when the dinosaurs roamed the earth and I was a medical receptionist. Right. I used to have a very distinct way I would answer the telephone. Okay. And, I try to be a very pleasant person, but I would answer the phone and I wanted people to hear my smile through my voice. I wanted them to hear that I cared through my voice. And I wanted them to walk away from this encounter with me, understanding that this was a place where people actually cared about you. Right. So I didn't realize it at the time that was something valuable.
Oh, yeah.
Until I heard other people answering the phone. And it wasn't that they were doing it wrong. They were just doing it differently. Right. And then I discovered that the doctors liked the way I did that. Mm-hmm. And before you know it, I had a little office of my own where I did nothing but answer the phone and, send calls to other people.
Right.
Having an entrepreneurial spirit, I said, well, wait a minute. Hey, I can work with this a little bit and see where I can grow with this. And before you know it, I was no longer a receptionist. I was a part of the admin team, so I had other responsibilities. Okay. And then I was a scheduling coordinator. Okay. Fancy name for a person who answers the phone.
Right. Schedule the appointments,
right?
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Now I can be trusted with a computer,
Right.
And slowly kind of worked my way through the admin responsibilities in the office. I learned billing, primary, secondary, tertiary. I learned how to negotiate contracts with payers, which is
extremely
extraordinarily marketable skill.
Yes.
And all of these little pieces, at the time when I was learning them, I thought, okay, well, this is just making me a little bit more secure with this job.
Right.
But ultimately, when you put all those pieces together, you step back and you go, wait a minute, I have a career.
Yeah.
I have a career with a base of knowledge, and I can stand in front of a group of anybody and tell them the right way to answer the phone.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And that's extremely important. And having someone answer the phone, just those skills that when you take it apart, it's one, small thing. But overall, after you've answered 200 phone calls, trust me, it makes a difference.
Sure.
It makes a difference how the other person on the other end is going to receive you, and definitely adding, value. And so, before I ask my next question, no, I'm going to ask the next question. How long have you been working in healthcare?
It's going to be, let's see. Am I going to include when I was an optician? Because then
include everything. We want to know because there's so many different paths.
Let's see.
In healthcare, and it's important for people to hear, how people got to where they are.
21 years.
21 years. Okay.
21 years.
Okay.
But I bounced around for a while. Okay. My love is people. I enjoy the quirkiness. The individuality of people. Okay. I find joy in things that make people happy. Okay. And that doesn't change according to specialty because people are people no matter what their issues are.
Right.
So I decided to start at something that didn't bleed or ooze, and that was eyes.
Okay.
And then I discovered that eyes indeed do ooze. Okay. So I had to move to another body part.
Oh my goodness.
Right. So I didn't want to get too medical.
Right.
And then I had a job in cardiology, which I loved because people have to see cardiologists for certain medical conditions quite often.
Right.
So I had more patient contact. Okay. And I decided from that maybe I should go into patient advocacy. So I started studying to be a patient advocate, and that took me to an emergency room.
Oh, wow.
Right. Okay. Where you can't avoid oozing.
Right. You can't avoid anything.
Right. So I stayed clinical for a little while because it's exciting. And I fancy myself sort of an adrenaline junkie in that regard, Then it wasn't that exciting anymore, The newness wore off the whole thing, and I said, let me go back behind the desk where life is good, pay is better,
right?
And no one's bleeding on me,
right?
So when I came back, I discovered the industry had changed, and significantly so. Okay. And I said, wow, I missed all this.
Right.
This is much more exciting than I gave it credit for.
Okay.
So I got all my little pieces that I learned how to do, and I put together a ragtag resume, and I keep that resume to this day because, it's bad. I wouldn't hire me. One of my skills was answers phones.
Right.
So,
right.
I got a job, believe it or not, with a crappy resume at an OB office, and I learned a lot from that manager. Mm-hmm. That manager kind of took me in, dusted me off, showed me the ropes. She taught me about managing people, and it was amazing. I had so much fun kind of just sitting at her feet and learning all the things that she had not yet placed a value on.
Right.
But I knew the value game at this point, and I'm like, oh, that's a marketable skill. Let's put that in the basket.
Yeah.
And at the end of my tenure with this particular company, they moved in another direction, and I moved in a separate direction, and I felt like there were so many other things that I can accomplish now because I learned these skill sets from this woman who was kind enough to share with me. Yeah.
So and that leads me to, just you focused on the importance of a manager who took the time to show you things, you know, and to not only train you, teach you, guide you in that way. And how important has that been in your career throughout, your different positions, different specialties that you've worked with?
It's tremendous. It's tremendous to this day. I've come a long way career-wise. However, every single day, I'm on PAHCOM's listserv. And sometimes I'm answering questions, sometimes I'm asking questions. Mm-hmm. The beauty of having someone else who does what you do, who's willing to share that information with you, saves you so much time. It's like reading a book. Right. It's often said you can read a book and learn what the author lived his whole life to find out in a couple hours.
Right.
The same thing works with getting information directly from the source. It's one thing to read a book on how to do something. It's another thing to stand next to someone who knows how to do it and learn firsthand. Exactly. It's very important that we as managers share the information we have. There are some managers who say, well, I don't want to share my information because, it can be used against me later on. Right. Never that. No. We have got to feed the people in our industry. The better we are individually, the better we are together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I always try to encourage people not to, especially medical receptionists, not to be afraid to accept help or accept guidance or accept a mentor or someone who's willing to help them. I know, I had the opportunity to help a few people more, I guess, that had kind of a higher aspiration, that, they knew kind of what direction they wanted to go in. It's like, I want to work in this office, but I want to do something else. Yes. And, sometimes there's not too many places to go in a smaller private practice. There's very true. So, working with people to try to create a position or to, allow them to get new skills to, to go into a different department. So the only way you can do that is by really having that shared knowledge and really, also being open to receiving it.
Absolutely.
So you talked about the other environments you've worked in. Mm-hmm. What has drawn you to behavioral health and mental health?
It's a funny story. I was having an argument, or let's not say argument. Let's say I was having a great, loud difference of opinion. Okay. with a provider that I worked for at the time, and it didn't resolve well. Okay. And I decided to take my skill set elsewhere, and it was a medical park. Okay. So, I'm looking back at this doctor, and he and I are kind of, yelling at each other, and I say to him, I'll go across the street and get a job. And he goes, well, go across the street. So I went across the street. And and I walked into this building, and when I walked into the building, there were just patients kind of sitting in the lobby. Or at least what I believe to be patients sitting in the lobby. And I said, what kind of, doctor's office is this? Oh my God, I hope it's not proctology. I hope it's not feet. I don't want to do any of that anymore. And there's a gentleman who's responding to my questions. Long story short, he turns out to be the managing physician of this practice. It's a mental health practice. Okay. And I told him, I said, oh, well, I don't do crazy. And he's like, really? I think you might need a few services of your own, So we got along like a house of fire. And I had the great fortune to learn all about mental health and behavioral health from someone who's legendary in that field. And it's very interesting. It's one practice where you'll never have to clean anyone or very few tools. Psychiatry can be practiced anywhere. But it is so very vital because the way your mind goes, your body goes. It's very important, especially nowadays with our children and this, really quick snap to world, to have what we like to call mental health breaks. Just take a minute, turn everything off, and kind of readjust and settle into what makes us really human, the human-to-human connection. Right. Not the cell phone, not the email, not the text message, but true looking your friend in the eye and saying, hey, you're my friend, I think you're great, I think you're awesome. Right. That is what makes us human. Not our ability to text 32, words in a second. Right. Definitely does not do that.
Okay. And you're definitely right about that. Disconnecting from our devices and other things are extremely important. So I want you to tell our our audience, what do you do as a compliance officer in this behavioral health setting? Like, what are your biggest responsibilities that fall under compliance?
Compliance really is three components. There are lots of moving pieces in these components, but really three components. You're a policy writer. So you take a look at a problem or an issue or a service that your agency or practice offers. You look at the way it's done, and then you write a policy that says this is the way that we're going to do it because we get these really good results when we do it. And that's the first component. The second component is that you revise policy because eventually that doesn't work anymore.
Right.
So you're the person who has the good fortune to go back to say, well, 90% of it works, but these three things don't, so I'm going to have to pull these out and kind of fix it again. The last component of compliance is usually what most people think of compliance officers as the auditing. And compliance officers get a bad rap because we come down on folk. However, all that time you spent writing that policy, they need to follow. So not only in-house policy, which would be your policies and procedure manual or standing operating procedure manual that you would get at work, but there are also state, local, federal laws that have to be followed. We all know about HIPAA. Some of us know about high-tech rules, especially if you're someone who uses an EMR, EHR. The Office of the Inspector General has very unique and defined rules for all medical practices. We have OSHA. And if you're not having a fire drill or an emergency management active shooter drill, if you live in like a hurricane zone, a weather drill, if you're not having those at least twice a year, you're not compliant. Right. And I know this because I say this to our managers all the time. Where's your fire drill? You know, you don't have to literally pull the fire alarm, but you can say, you know, ding, ding, fire drill, everybody get out the building. It builds muscle memory. And that muscle memory can save you in the event of an emergency. So compliance officers kind of stand on the policy. You write the policy, you revise the policy, you kind of polish it up, make it nice, and then you stand on it. And when I say stand on it, there are going to be many issues that people say, well, can we do it this way, this one time? This is where compliance officers get a bad rap. We want it the same way every single time because it's easier for us to assign a value to it if it's the same way every time. If it changes for this patient or this provider, then is it really a policy?
Right, absolutely.
So yeah, I spend a lot of time
then
writing.
It becomes just a guideline.
Maybe. It becomes a best practice.
A best practice, right.
That's really not your best because if it was,
then you'd be doing it, right? Then everybody be doing it.
And then I could audit it, and you know, and when the auditor is happy, everybody happy, happy.
So, give us an example of a situation where one of your front desk staff would want to connect with you directly on a situation that has to do with compliance.
Oh, it happens every day. I get lots and lots of phone calls. Sometimes from my front desk people, mostly from my therapists who work in the field, sometimes from our prescribers and providers. But usually in the front desk, what happens is there's someone who doesn't have the proper documentation to become a patient with us. We serve mainly a Medicaid population, and Medicaid in Maryland has a very specific set of rules about what constitutes a patient. We have a 19-page booklet. I'm a writer. A 19-page booklet that has all of the necessary waivers, and we've got of course your HIPAA waiver. We've got consent for treatment. We've got therapy policy. I mean, every policy that you can think of to kind of get a person up and running. Sometimes there are people who say, I don't want to sign it. Or there are some people who say, I forgot my ID, which is a big thing now. I forgot my identification. Well, I told you who I was. This is my mom, and she can say that I am who I am.
Right.
And I got like all these credit cards or, other documentation. But Maryland's rules are very specific. I need to see your photo identification, state issue preferred. Right. And I need to have your insurance card, and we make a color copy of those documents in our computer system.
Okay.
They can't proceed. No one can proceed with an appointment until it's in the system. And I built those in to prevent from them calling me going, Coley, can, her mom's got half a passport. Can we see her? Those type of things. So I get a lot of that. Although they know the answer, I ask them to call me. Okay. I'm never angry that they reach out to me because I don't ever want it to be a contentious, thing between the patient
right,
and the front desk,
Absolutely.
because these aren't the front desk rules. They're just following the law.
Absolutely.
They don't know enough about the law to be able to competently explain to them that this is a rule that protects you.
Right.
So if you lose your insurance card, anybody could pick it up
and go anywhere to any
and come
provider.
and get services. And Medicaid doesn't pay for everything.
Right.
There are some services that Medicaid will pay for once, maybe twice in a certain period of time. You need it, but you can't use it because somebody else used it under your name. So it's really a safeguard for yourself. And explaining that to people requires a couple of things. One, you have to be people-centric.
Right.
They have to feel like you're on their side.
Absolutely.
And busy people aren't. When you're working the front desk, because I work the front desk sometimes here in my own offices, and I'm telling you, I feel like a 5-armed, whirlwind trying to get everything going. And it's amazing to me because the people who generally work there look like they're not doing much, but I'm up there like,
It feels like it. But just like you have your own organization behind, when you're behind your desk, I know receptionists have different, their own processes to keep things in line.
That's
and
very
stuff like
true.
That.
And my receptionist knows when I've been in her space, she's like, "Oh, you moved my," and I'm like, "Well, I needed it," and I'm like looking at her panicked, and she goes, "What would you do without me?" I said, "I don't want to know. I don't want to know what I would have to do without you." But I think it's important from a compliance standpoint for compliance officers not to hide in their offices when there's an issue, not to allow your front desk people, who are really the front line of your practice, the face of your practice, to be the one to deliver bad news on a policy set by someone else. I think it's disingenuous, and it's really, really bad at building camaraderie with your team. My front desk people know if it's a policy that I wrote, and they all are, that I stand behind it 100%. There's a reasoning behind that, and I don't allow anyone to treat them disrespectfully because of something that I decided. If they want to come in my office and sit down behind the half door and have a conversation, I'm all up for that. But what we're not going to do is treat my front line or devalue anyone on it.
And that type of support is what I would hope all managers offer to to their front office staff, because I didn't mind taking the bullet at times, because they have to see them every single time they come in. I don't. And I'm going to be able to explain something more precisely. I'm going to, I'm not going to necessarily feel bad. I'm going to have empathy for whatever your situation is, but I can tell you, without it looking like they're just telling you no, or they don't want to do so. Then it seems like it may look like, oh, they don't want to help me, or they're not, they won't allow me to do this. But when you come from a manager or a compliance standpoint, usually it will, it usually provides, you get a better response, or at least you can take it to, a private office, private area, have the conversation with the patient.
Well, especially in behavioral health, because we're already dealing with deficits. And people don't reach out for help with mental illness or behavioral issues until it's bad. There's a million ways to pretend like it's not happening. But then when it gets to the point where you can no longer ignore it, you make the appointment. In some places in our state, it takes 6 months to get in. There's a serious provider shortage. So when they finally do get in, and they, got the 19 pages, and they got the insurance card, and they got the child that needs help, and they get there, and you're like, you don't have an ID, I can't see you. Sometimes it's contentious, but I would never leave that on the people that I need to shine 24/7, and that's what you need your receptionist to do. You need them to be, as I like to say, on stage at all times. So I don't want anything that's going to, rain on her happy cloud. I want her to be happy, well-adjusted, have the tools that she needs. And for us, that means having the ability to say no, the power to say no, with the full backing of her leadership team.
Absolutely. And then, then she can kind of go on her day and continue to help every patient that walks in, instead of having that heavy thing, that happened earlier in the day. So I've worked for a few practices in my day, and we did not always, there wasn't always a compliance officer present. So from when I was a receptionist to a manager, I feel like, a lot of times the managers just kind of took on that role. But with all the things that are happening today, why would you say that it's more important now than even before that practices have in-house certified compliance officers in their office. Do you think that's something that everyone should have, or what do you think about that?
I think the quick answer is to say yes, but let me explain why. There are so many rules coming out of federal agencies so very fast. It's hard for me to keep up with it, and it's one of my primary functions. I mean, yes, I'm the executive compliance officer, but I still manage all of the offices, managers, and as you well know, patients text me 24/7, and I'm not clinical, so there are a lot of things to do, but my primary focus is to make sure that I know the laws that are coming out. CMS, in the last, say, 30 days, have changed about 10 things, and not little changes, significant changes. The kind of crushing of the E&M code for all Medicare patients happens as a proposed rule July. They say it's going to take effect calendar year 2019. Well, we all know that CMS starts their year in October.
Right.
So how much time do we have to get ready for this? This is a significant thing that's going to cost the practice money. They're talking about a 2% reduction. Realistically, those numbers are closer to 5 to 10%. That could be layoffs. Okay. That could be a lot of things that are going on.
Right.
But if you don't have someone who's keeping track of that, you don't know it until you get your remittance back, and you're like, $93. That was a level 5. What am I getting $93? And then you have to do the backtracking. So the advantage of having a compliance officer is inherent in the name. They keep you compliant. If you've ever lived through an audit, a Medicaid audit, a Medicare audit, Blue Cross Blue Shield audit, anybody's audit, you understand that they talk to everybody. They talk to the receptionist. They're looking for business associate agreements for your cleaning team. They kind of come through your practice with a fine-tooth comb and just kind of pull it and see what flies out. Well, what happens when you have a compliance officer, especially a certified compliance officer, 9 times out of 10, that compliance officer is certified with the same agency or organization that this compliance person who's coming to audit you are. So there's a little camaraderie there. There's a lot of respect that goes into, come on in, we'd love to have you audit. Here are the audits I've done all year long. Here are the deficits that I found, and this is the way we fixed it.
So you're already on top of it because this is what you do.
Absolutely.
So you're it's not like, at the end of the year we're trying to gather all this information and make sure things happened 6 months ago. You're just constantly following up and keeping your own records.
I do chart audits every single day. Every single day I'm looking at somebody's work. I'm not only checking for content, I'm also checking to make sure their names are spelled right, the social security number is correct, their addresses are correct. All of these little things ding up on an audit. My front desk staff gets audited. They do very well because they don't like to get dinged. And those, for me, I'm a prize type of person. I reward good behavior. So they get dinged, there's no pizza. And they're like, we're not going to do that. So we make sure that everything is what it's supposed to be. And it goes so very well hand in hand with being a certified medical manager, because one of the things that certified medical managers do is you make sure that everything has a place and everything's in that place. It's a valuable asset to a practice because eventually everybody gets audited. And you'd rather get audited with a compliance officer who says, I know we had this problem, this is the way we plan to fix it, and this is what we've already done. You don't get dinged for that. There's no demerit for that. In fact, they like that. They like that you know what's going on in your practice and you're willing to fix it. What usually happens, though, if you don't have a certified compliance officer and perhaps the manager who's wearing 16 hats, that's her Wednesday hat, to be the compliance officer, and she says that she did an audit, and certified auditor comes in and looks at it and says, definitely not an audit. And how did you look past this mistake? How did you look past that error? This note's not signed. This note says it's Charlie, but the name on the chart says Roxanne. Little things like that can happen. Yes. But when you say you've looked at it and you said it was all good, now they're looking at you. One of the most horrible things that can happen to a compliance officer is that you do an audit and it's wrong and you know it's wrong and you file it anyway. Because eventually it will come to light. And when it comes to light and your company has to pay that money back, they don't only look at the company owner, they're looking at you. You know, there have been huge cases where the Office of the Inspector General, recently there was one in Texas, was like $2.5 million, not only attached the owners of the company, the managing physicians of the company, also the compliance officer.
Oh, wow.
Because you're a corporate officer, you know where the bodies are buried, you know where the dirt is, and it's your responsibility to make sure that your company lives up to the promise of quality care for all the patients.
Wow.
It's a lot.
So it's a big responsibility.
Yes.
But in that big responsibility, what have since you've taken on that additional role, what are some of the processes that you've implemented? Maybe something that came to light after you've done your training, have you done to improve the processes of the office?
One of the big things I noticed, we used to have a, I don't want to call it an aromatherapy room, but like a decompression room where patients could come and there were bean bags and, nice lighting, and we had the white noise machine playing the wave. Okay. And we thought, on paper, that's a great idea for a behavioral health practice. I mean, when everybody's, chill vibes and mellowed out, our day would go smooth.
Right.
Well, unless everybody has the favorite beanbag chair and somebody else is sitting on it.
Right.
We found ourselves overcompensating for problems we didn't have yet.
Right.
And that came about from me doing an audit. How many complaints did we have before we had the decompression room? About wait times, about, other patients interacting or, behavior that was out of line in the waiting room. We had very few of those. And then we said, well, to address those 3 or 4 problems, we'll do this new thing. And we did the new thing, and our problems went up by 36%.
Oh, wow.
And then we said, okay, well, maybe if we just get the same bean bags for everybody, all the chairs look the same. Now people are mad at us because all of the chairs look the same. So we created problems for ourselves. The beautiful thing about having a compliance officer is that somebody's looking at the numbers going, this was dumb. We should have never done this. We got ourselves in the hole. So we took away the decompression room and made it a standard lobby where we have chairs. We've got a flat screen TV that plays HGTV. There's no other channels. We still kept a couple of the perks. We have water, ice cold water. We have the little buzzers, pagers, where they can go out and onto the parking lot and smoke or go in their cars. We have a park behind us so they can go to the park. And if they have to wait long, then we'll just buzz them and they can come back. So we solved the problem.
That's a good thing. Yeah. Go ahead.
Cost $200 Amazon. Right. Not the $3,000 decompression room.
Get fresh air.
Right. Yeah. It cost us $200 to solve a problem that we spent about $6,000 on. That we created for ourselves. So sometimes you have the right idea. You wanted to do this wonderful thing that people didn't ask you for.
Right.
And you find out that, one, it's not wonderful and they don't want it. And now, but knowing that you have someone on your staff who's looking at those numbers, and it's not just an emotional reaction to it, because the staff loved the decompression room. I mean, I dug it. I'm going to be honest with you. Give me a couple of drops of that jasmine oil on it. I'm like, hey, it's really
relaxing,
nice.
Right.
The patients, not so much. They thought it was kind of hokey.
Right. And it might work elsewhere. It just didn't work here. And you paid attention to that, and that's kind of what we have to do.
We did a full-scale audit. And I full-scale audit a lot of things. And that 36% was a very real number to me. Because imagine 36% of your patients not wanting to come there because of
that. Yeah. That's huge.
I'm not giving up 36% of my pay.
I was just going to say, it translates into income and visits and everything else.
Absolutely.
So, can you give us? I'm gonna phrase this a little differently.
Sure.
Because you have kind of a pretty vast experience. What advice would you give to managers and even front office staff to not only help with compliance, but also just their overall health of their front desk and their anything that you can give? Your top 3 things that you would tell someone if you met, I'm a new manager or I work at the front desk and this is happening. What would you tell someone to kind of help them get through, not to get through, but to just maybe improve things or to keep compliant. We'll keep it at that.
So one of the most important things in any practice that you'll especially hear from compliance officers, communication. It solves 99% of the problems in the workplace, and the 1% that it doesn't is not really a problem. I'm going to be very honest with you. So many managers do not effectively communicate with the staff. Managers are busy, and I get that. As a manager myself, I know I'm busy.
Right.
I've got 4 screens in this office, 5 screens at the house. I'm a busy person. However, that does not relinquish my responsibility to make sure that my staff has what they need to be successful, and that I'm speaking to them human being to human being. Right. I'm not saying, look at me, big manager, I'm sitting on the chair with wheels, and you don't have any wheels. Yeah. Some places I've worked myself where managers were on a whole nother planet, and the practice was somewhere else. And it's not nefarious in any way, but sometimes you, as a manager, you get caught up in a project, and the chips just have to fall where they are.
Right.
But if we're communicating, and I'm telling you, Siobhan, I've got this big project I've got to do. I'm going to need you to hold down the front for me. I trust you. I have faith in your ability. If you need something, like if you're on fire or someone's chasing you with a knife, then call me or maybe text me or send me an email. But otherwise, my head's going to be out of the game. I need you to hold the fort down. Now, as someone who's worked the front desk, I would have felt empowered. I would have been like, okay, you trust me, and I'm going to show you right. I'm going to show you that all the things I know how to do, and I'm only going to call you if, the front office is on fire and I can't put it out. You know what I mean?
Yes.
To say that to someone who's new in our industry, or even not so new in the industry, but likes to work the front desk, because there are people like me, I like to answer the phone, who like to work the front desk, that vote of confidence. And that little bit of vulnerability, saying, listen, I'm human just like you are. My boss is on my case. I got to get this thing done. Right. It brings people together. I'm a big middle of the road person. I have several managers who work for me. I have an assistant who's also a manager. And out of all of those people, they will tell you there's not one thing that they can't call me and say. Right. I have clients that text me all kind of, knock jokes in the middle of the night and all that kind of thing, because I want people to feel like when they communicate with me or they come to me, they're leaving me better than when they came.
Absolutely.
That is what makes a good manager. Not necessarily how many letters you have behind your name. Listen, I love alphabet soup behind my name.
Right.
I love it. It makes the resume look sterling, Right. But the reality is, if those letters don't translate into really good people skills, what are you doing with yourself?
And that's healthcare in general. I think
absolutely
the communication is huge, and I'm glad you said that, because that is number one. The communication is number one.
All 3 of my answers are communication.
Exactly, and I'll take that, because that that's huge. And I, when I was working with the OBGYN group, eventually I was managing 2 offices, which I hadn't done, for most of my career. And then it's like, you have to stay in touch with, all your people in every place, and, be present and still know what's going on here and there. And, it's very important, but for you to be fair and to allow people to know that they can come to you and talk to you and reach out to you. It's like, just because I'm over here doesn't mean I have no time, but just make sure that our time is being used. Right. It's meaningful time. Have it together before you call, and deal with this.
I have this conversation with one of my therapists now, and boy, I just love her. She's terrific. She's a fantastic therapist. She works a lot with our recovering opioid addicts. So she has a very specific skill set that is in extraordinarily high demand, but she's a terrific therapist. And if I knew half of what she knew or knows, I could start my whole entire business somewhere else. The one thing that she does that, that just makes me want to kill her is that she starts in the middle of a sentence. So she doesn't give you enough information to know what she's talking about. So you kind of have to listen, and then you give her a few minutes, and then she kind of says, oh, that's right, you don't know this, blah, 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 blah. She's in her head a lot, and she has, I think, like 28, 29 clients. Mm-hmm. So she's in her head a whole lot. You know, she's cycling through information. So she'll walk up and say, I scanned it, and walk away from you. And you're like, okay, I'm just going to put that in the file and come back when you're finished with, that thought.
Right.
Or she'll say, somebody was in drug court and I scanned the subpoena. It's nice to have it all together.
Right.
But if you're going to give me pieces, I'm going to take them and I'm going to put them in a little box and put it on a shelf until you're ready.
Right.
That is communication.
Right.
That's communication. It may sound like she's not a very good communicator. Completely opposite the difference. What makes it a good communication is because I know enough about this person. I cared enough to figure out how her thought process works, so I don't judge her for it.
Right.
Right. Now, would I ever walk up to somebody and say I scanned it? Absolutely not.
Right.
Because, I'm a compliance officer, and there's a certain type of person that finds joy in that particular job. It's not something that everybody would want to do.
Right.
But I'm, fortunate enough that I'm that person.
Right.
So I try to be as effective a communicator as humanly possible. Mm-hmm. I am a prankster, so I prank a lot. Do that quite often.
Have fun.
And so the people who work with me, regardless if they're with me physically or I'm communicating via Skype or, on the phone or texting, whatever, they understand that, there's time for play and there's a time when I'm really, really serious. And then there's a time when, I'm kind of loving you on the backside. So sometimes being a compliance officer is a Band-Aid kind of experience. And I love you to death. I think you're wonderful. You're great at your job. But if you don't start signing these notes, I'm going to have to fire you.
Exactly.
It's a Band-Aid. Love you, love you, love you. On the backside.
But I need you to do this.
Right. I don't want you to make
benefit.
my job harder.
Right.
I need you to make your job better. So
and it's a safeguard for your office. It just really reduces the issues that you may have in the future, and you're saving them time. If you were doing this once a year and not as regularly as you're doing it, then we
would be in real trouble.
And we've seen that, and it happens.
It happens.
So we know.
A lot.
So we know.
You, as an auditor, I can tell you what happens if I go into one of the offices and I do a simple chart audit. I'll just, I use a randomizer, just pulls up, 5-6 names, and I go into one chart and it's not signed. One encounter, it's not signed. Guess what my inclination is?
Right.
I'm going back to the randomizer and I'm pulling 40 names.
Yeah.
And then if I find some more that are not signed, I'm looking at all of your work product for the year. And I'm going through with a fine-tooth comb. And it's not because I'm trying to say, aha, got you.
Right.
What I'm trying to do is prevent CMS from coming and going, aha, got you. So it's easier and a much better, smoother process to do it in-house. Hopefully you have an office and a compliance officer who's personable, who has a good enough rapport with the staff that when there's something that's wrong or something that's borderline, we do have some borderline moments where we can sit down and hammer out a compromise. Again, because I'm the person who writes the policy, if all of the staff are doing it a certain way and the policy says to do it the other way, I'm not changing the staff. I'm changing the policy. But I need to have empirical data to take to my owner and say, this used to be your policy, and it was a good policy, and it worked for years, but the staff is doing it another way. Here's the data that shows that it's better this other way. So we're going to change it.
And that's great that you all consider what your staff is doing because, again, they're doing it every day. This is what they do. And sometimes they may have better ideas or they may have a better way, and some places are not always open to that. And that's why I kind of encourage receptionists to not hold back. If you have an idea or if you have a process or anything that can help your office, don't be afraid to share that, with someone or create it yourself if you have to. Sometimes you got to do it yourself. But, because just because you're in one role doesn't mean that your experience has not allowed you to provide a little more.
Absolutely. And I always say that knowledge. We know so much more than we think we do. And,
absolutely.
Once you find, and this happens, everyone has these little aha moments throughout the day. When you start to listen to that voice, don't be afraid to be the idea person. I mean, my first medical receptionist job, I had ideas every day. So much so that my then manager kept a no file, and it was all mine. And she'd be like, no, we're not doing that. No. Yeah. Every now and again, she'd throw me a yes, and it was like a party, But showed her that I was so invested in what I wanted to do for a living, and invested in the company, that I was thinking outside of the box. I got continual raises because the owners were like, that's not such a bad idea. I mean, if we could afford it, it would be great. I came up with a smart scheduling solution so that people didn't have to wait a long time, because, working the front desk, you get the brunt of, I've been here too long.
Right.
They don't ever go to the doctor and be like, you made me wait. They're just so happy to be seen. So one of the things I wanted to do was to institute an on-time, every-time schedule. Okay. My manager said absolutely not, because that's going to require a whole lot of changes, and we're not doing that because, you're rambunctious. We're not doing that, So I said, well, can I at least just show it to you? Can I make a PowerPoint and show it to you? Mm-hmm. And she goes, fine. You can show it at the office meeting on Friday, because we had Friday and Monday office meetings. Uh-huh. So I, you know me. Yeah. The beautiful PowerPoint, right? It's fading in and out and pixelated, So it was visually stunning. Right. And all of the managing physicians were there. Some of the partner physicians were there, and they said, we can't afford it. Okay. We just can't afford to do it that way. We would need to hire so many more people. But this is brilliant, and we love that you know enough about us, and that you care enough about our patients to even put this together. Right. So we think that, we're going to bump you up. And I'm like, hey, I got other PowerPoints. Because,
right. I can show you a lot of other things.
I've reorganized your whole office.
Right. Oh, listen, Coley, you have been wonderful guest today, and thank you so much for sharing all of your experience with us. You've been a huge supporter of the Medical Receptionist Network.
Yay.
And also the Medical Receptionist Handbook to Success from the beginning. And, having the responsibilities that you have in your various roles in the healthcare industry, I just have found your feedback and support very important, and I value it very much. So I just want to say thank you.
My eyes are
so much. But we do like to end our show on kind of a interesting or a fun note. Mm-hmm. So we're going to ask you a question that does have nothing to do with healthcare.
Okay.
So last but not least, if you could decide to live anywhere in the world tomorrow, where would it be?
Where would it be? There's a picture on my wall right behind you. That's the picture of the view of Maui.
Okay.
My mentor, Dr. Peter Mendelis, God rest his soul, and I traveled there quite often. Him definitely more often than me.
Right.
I'm a working stiff.
Right.
But there's a lanai. These homes here are small because it's an island, and there's a lanai, and then there's like a guest house. So this is the view out of the space between the lanai and the guest house, and it is just an amazing place. It's a very sentimental place for me, and it just reminds me of good times, happy times, some very funny times. I'm not a bug girl, and there are a bunch of geckos. Even in the picture, there's a spider in the picture. Oh, no. Outside of that is a wonderful place. Right. I really had some very interesting conversations there. Okay. We used to play this game if you could have a conversation with anyone who's ever lived, who would you talk to? Mm-hmm. So, we had, Chuck E. Cheese and Mario from Mario Brothers. I mean, you sit on the beach in paradise and allow your mind to just ponder the universe. Yeah. And it's a beautiful, beautiful place. And the people there are so very loving, and not in a, kind of physical way, but in an emotional, cerebral kind of way. Like, if they see two people sitting on the beach and they look introspective, they're not coming over going, hey, how are you? They just kind of leave you to yourself so you can do your thing. Mm-hmm. But if you look lost, these are people who would take you home, feed you, give you a shower, drive you to where you were going, originally. They're a very, very special type of people. Wow. That would probably be abused and taken advantage of here on the mainland. So they stay on this very happy island, where people come to visit for a little taste of paradise. So I would absolutely be sitting on my wicker chair, looking out the window, hoping that spider didn't come for me.
Didn't come for you. Well, hopefully you get to experience Maui again.
Oh, I can't wait.
And thank you again, Coley Bennett, everyone. We will see you next next time on the Medical Receptionist Network podcast. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Medical Receptionist Network podcast show. Don't forget to visit our website, medicalreceptionistnetwork.com, and subscribe to our newsletter. If you're looking for a great resource for medical receptionists, make sure you grab your copy of the Medical Receptionist Handbook to Success, available on Amazon. Lastly, if you have not subscribed to this podcast, please find us on your favorite podcast player and subscribe today. Until next time, keep being amazing.